Hi guys, today we'll be talking about the revolt of 1857, a popular revolt that broke out in northern and central India and posed a serious challenge to British rule. While it began with the mutiny of the sepoys of the East India Company, it soon drew into its fold millions of peasants, artisans, and soldiers who fought heroically for more than a year and wrote a glorious chapter in Indian history. It's important to understand that the revolt was the result of economic exploitation and a massive discontent among the population of northern and central India with foreign rule. When we look at the reasons for the revolt, one of the most important reasons became the increase in land revenue which had been put in place by the British, which meant that a lot of peasants lost their land to debtors and moneylenders as they were unable to repay the loans that they had taken for cultivation of their lands. Moreover, there was an increase in corruption in the administration, and petty officials who had been installed by the British benefited from the exploitation of the roads or the cultivators of the land. Middle and upper class Indians lost the administrative positions that they had held in various Indian royal states, which had also been dethroned by the British. It wasn't just those who were occupying administrative posts, but even those people who followed cultural pursuits in the courts of the various Rajas and Maharajas of princely India who lost their livelihoods with the coming of the British. These included musicians, dancers, amongst other occupations. The British also felt racially superior to Indians. However, it was primarily the annexation of Awadh that created widespread resentment against the British rule in India. Awadh had been annexed by Lord Dalhousie in 1856 on the pretext of freeing its people from the Nawab's oppression and the Talukdar's exploitation, while the reality was far from it. What actually happened in Awadh, which was a fabulously rich princely state in current day Uttar Pradesh, is as follows. The dissolution of the Nawab's court meant that his nobles, officials, their retainers, and soldiers were thrown out of employment. Moreover, the British confiscated the estates of the traditional landowning communities of the talukdars and the zamindars who had deep social and financial roots in the village economy of Awadh, making them a dangerous enemy. This move angered the sepoys of the East India Company since 75,000 of them were from Awadh. It wasn't just about the annexation of Awadh. There were deeply rooted fears in society about what the coming of British rule would mean for the country, contributing to many social causes for the revolt. The most important of these became the activities of Christian missionaries. Missionaries began to be seen everywhere, from hospitals to schools and markets. These missionaries made vulgar and insulting remarks about Hindu beliefs and practices, and therefore angered the religious sentiments of a conservative populace. It wasn't just in society that missionaries were seen. The army also maintained its own priests at its own cost, making the sepoys uneasy as to what it would mean for their own religion. The abolition of sati, Western education for girls, and the allowing of widow remarriage were seen by the Indian population as an interference in their religion and their customs. It becomes important to understand as to what upset the sepoys of the East India Company, who in fact had taken an oath to serve the company. There were various reasons for it. The first being that Bipin Chandra has called the sepoy as a peasant in uniform. This meant that a lot of sepoys had families who owned land in Awadh and were very much impacted by the changed land policies of the British in many ways, just like the peasants. Moreover, a wide gulf had existed between the officers and sepoys of the East India Company. Sepoys were not allowed to wear their caste and sectarian marks such as beards, turbans, lockets, and pendants. They were forbidden from refusing orders to travel overseas. Now you may think this is strange, but for many Hindu soldiers, the belief was that traveling overseas would make them lose their caste. So you understand why it becomes a particular irritation to the sepoy when such an order is passed. They were referred to as pigs or sewers by some English officers, clearly meaning that there was no sense of brotherhood or fraternity between the officers and the sepoys. There was no advancement prospect in the military beyond the rank of a subedar for an Indian sepoy. This meant, in a sense, that younger British officers could climb the hierarchy of the army, while the Indian sepoy only could rise to the rank of a subedar. A more immediate reason was that they were not to be given bata or a foreign service allowance when serving in faraway places like Sindh or Punjab. Once again, for perspective, these were sepoys who lived their whole life in Awadh and had never ventured beyond these lands. It becomes important to know what was the immediate cause of the revolt of 1857. A new rifle had been introduced in the East India Company. The new Enfield rifle, however, had a cartridge covered with greased paper that had to be bitten off with teeth before it had to be loaded. Now, what was the problem with this greased paper was that it was rumored to be greased with pig or cow fat. To understand this, the pig was haram for Muslim sepoys, while the cow was sacred to Hindus, which meant that both those groups of sepoys would have immediate problems with the using of such a rifle. It wasn't just this. There was a widespread belief that it was an attempt to convert the sepoys to Christianity. The stage was set for revolt. The epicenter of the revolt was at Meerut in Uttar Pradesh. Prior to this, however, a young soldier called Mangal Pandey had been hanged in Barrackpur for attacking his superiors and revolting single-handedly. The reason for this continued to remain the cartridges. But let's go back to Meerut. On 24th April 1857, 90 men of the 3rd Native Cavalry refused to accept the grease cartridges. They were sentenced to imprisonment and were thrown in jail. This time, the other sepoys revolted, freed their imprisoned comrades, and killed their white officers. Their next step was to go from Meerut to Delhi, where they proclaimed the old and sickly Bahadur Shah Zafar as the Emperor of India. Having done that, and the news having spread to various parts of northern India, the entire Bengal army rose in revolt, and thus spread not only to Awadh, Rohilkhand, Doab, Bundelkhand, but even Bihar and East Punjab. Many other princely states remained British loyalists and did not raise a single word about the mutiny. In Delhi, the sepoys approached the old Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last scion of the Mughal Empire, and declared him as the Emperor of India. However, Bahadur Shah Zafar, whether under the pressure of the sepoys or perhaps out of inspiration, wrote out letters to chiefs and rulers across India to organize a confederacy and rise against British rule. The sepoys may have started the revolt, but they certainly weren't the only ones who had participated in it. Peasants fought with axes and spears, lathis and sickles, and pretty much anything that they could lay their hands on. It was their attempt to change their lives for the better. They expressed their anger by destroying the records of debt that had been held by local moneylenders. These records of debt had become a symbol of their oppression and all that was wrong with their lives. They not only attacked local moneylenders, but even British law courts, revenue offices, the records of revenue, as well as the local thanas or the police offices. There were many Indian rulers who rose against the British. One of them was Nana Sahib. Nana Sahib was the son of the last Peshwa, Baji Rao II. After the death of the Peshwa, the British refused to give him the pension that had been given to his predecessor and drove him away from his family seat of Pune in Maharashtra to the faraway Kanpur. Not one to be put down so easily, when the chance came, Nana Sahib drove the British out of Kanpur and declared himself governor. In this, he was aided by his trusted lieutenant Tatia Tope, who was an expert in guerrilla warfare. But Nana Sahib's legacy is corrupted. He destroyed his own reputation by killing the British garrison of Kanpur after agreeing that he would not do so. In the massacre that followed, not only were the British soldiers of Kanpur killed, but so were their women and children. The massacre happened at the Satichora Ghat, next to the Ganga River in Kanpur, and came to be known as the Massacre Ghat eventually. The Begum, or wife of the Nawab of Awadh, Hazrat Mahal, fought on behalf of her young son, Birjus Qadar. She was aided by the sepoys and peasants and the zamindars of Awadh, and she organized an all-out attack on the British in Lucknow. The British forces in Lucknow retreated into the residency, an official building. Hazrat Mahal and her army could not enter the residency as the British garrison fought back with fierceness and valor. The residency ended up getting destroyed and the siege of the residency failed. One of the most well-known stories of the revolt of 1857 is that of the Rani of Jhansi. The Rani fought for her right to put her adopted son on the throne, something which had been forbidden by the British. She captured Gwalior, where Maharaja Sindhia, who was a British loyalist, opposed her. Another lesser known leader of the revolt was Kunwar Singh, a discontented and ruined zamindar of Ara in Bihar. The almost 80-year-old Kunwar Singh was called as one of the most strategic leaders of the revolt. Despite the joint efforts of peasants, sepoys, rulers, zamindars, the revolt failed. The majority of the peasants and the sepoys ended up either being blown from cannons as punishment or hanged to their deaths. All of this brings us to the important question of why the revolt failed. Most of the Indian states and zamindars continued to remain loyal to the British and did not join into the revolt. These included the royal houses of Scindias, Holkars, the Nizam of Hyderabad, the Raja of Jodhpur, the rulers of Patiala, Jindh and Nabha in Punjab. Most middle and upper class Indians did not favor the rebels. They saw the rebels as primitive, uneducated and backward and thought that they would take India back into the feudal age. Many talukdars stopped revolting against the British once the British promised them that they would return them their estates, which had been the cause of their misery all along. Money lenders who were targeted by the peasants naturally supported the British, who then they saw as allies. Merchants in Bombay, Madras, and Calcutta derived massive profits from their British mercantile connections and so naturally favored the British. There were many disadvantages that the rebels had. They had primitive weapons, where the British had ample men, money, as well as arms. Moreover, the revolt did not plan or dream of what would happen after they overthrew the British rule in India. There was no ideology, no political perspective, or a social and economic alternative. Revolt suffered setback after setback as its icons were lost. Bahadur Shah Zafar, who had been proclaimed Emperor of India, was imprisoned and exiled to Burma. Nana Sahib and Begum Hazrat Mahal were both defeated respectively in Kanpur and Lucknow. Both these rulers fled to Nepal and rarely anything was heard of them later. Heroes such as the Rani of Jhansi, the aged Kunwar Singh of Bihar, and others such as Maulvi Ahmadullah and Bakht Khan, who had fought the British in Delhi, were all killed. However, that's not all that the revolt was about. It was the first great struggle for independence and is therefore valuable for being just that. Not only that, it gave us leaders who have become household names, and generation after generation of Indians have grown up hearing about the bravery of those who led the revolt, most popular, of course, being Mangal Pandey and the Rani of Jhansi. Most importantly, it continued to provide a legacy of inspiration that fueled the imaginations of nationalist leaders who would rise in India a few decades later. That, of course, is the greatest legacy of the revolt of 1857.